Hi there, I'm Marcia. I thought my baby shower would be a fresh start, until my own mother stood up with a fake paternity test in her hands and tried to destroy everything in front of my family and friends. But the truth, the betrayal went so much deeper than just one lie. Why would a family plan an entire celebration just to humiliate you? Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever been blindsided by someone you trusted? What time are you listening to this and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear your story. The scent of cinnamon rolls drifted lazily through the kitchen, but it did little to warm the heavy air inside my parents' house that morning. September's early chill pressed against the windows, blurring the glass like a warning. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself, pretending not to notice the looks that passed between the people I loved and trusted once. Carla's glance was the sharpest, sly, knowing, and too pleased for the casual gathering it was supposed to be. The clink of coffee cups and polite murmurs filled the space as everyone nibbled on brunch. Kevin's hand found mine under the table, a small reassurance I clung to even as I felt the atmosphere shift, almost imperceptibly at first. I caught Carla leaning toward our cousin, her voice just low enough to not be public, but just loud enough to find my ears. Of course they rushed the wedding, Carla laughed under her breath. What else could they do? It's not exactly a secret. I mean, look at her. My stomach dropped so hard I had to grip the edge of my chair. I wanted to believe I misheard, but the sly look she shot me confirmed it. The seed had been planted. I stirred my tea slowly, forcing my face into a neutral smile. Years of practice made it easy. In small towns like Madison, rumors moved faster than wind through dry leaves and just as ruthlessly. I watched the laughter bubble up around Carla and her small audience like nothing was wrong, like they weren't gutting me in real time. The worst part wasn't hearing her. It was the silence that followed when no one corrected her. Trying to salvage the moment, I busied myself passing around napkins, refilling coffee cups, doing anything but acknowledging the fresh betrayal blooming inside me. Kevin must have sensed my stiffness. His thumb gently traced circles over my hand, grounding me for a second longer. Then came Di Mary's voice, sweet and oblivious, slicing through the room like a dull blade. Well, she chuckled, raising her glass slightly, it's just wonderful Marcia found someone willing to marry her so quickly, isn't it? The laughter that followed wasn't malicious. It was worse. It was pitying. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth, the room tilting slightly around me. Every gaze shifted toward me. No one said it outright, but I could hear the silent chorus. Poor Marcia, poor desperate girl. The humiliation burned through my chest, and I struggled to remember how to breathe. I set my fork down carefully, willing my hands not to shake. Smiling felt impossible, but I tried anyway, the corners of my mouth lifting into a grimace that probably made me look even guiltier. In that moment, every childhood memory came rushing back. The times Carla lied and twisted stories, the times I was blamed without proof, the times Mom smoothed things over for the sake of family unity at the cost of my dignity. The patterns had always been there. I just refused to see them. I pushed back from the table under the guise of fetching more coffee, heart pounding against my ribs. In the kitchen, the clatter and conversation faded to a low hum behind me. I leaned against the counter, forcing slow breaths through my nose. That's when I heard it. Eleanor's voice, sharp but low, speaking to Carla near the pantry door. Just keep it together, she hissed. We can't afford another scene. Appearances, Carla. Always appearances. My spine stiffened. It wasn't random. It wasn't an accident. They were orchestrating something, and whatever it was, it had only just begun. The sun sat higher in the sky now, but the chill hadn't lifted. It wrapped around me tighter than my cardigan could manage as I moved mechanically through the backyard, balancing a plate of fruit I barely tasted. Everyone had filtered outside after brunch, laughing, chatting in loose circles among the faded garden chairs and picnic tables. It looked like a scene from a postcard, bright, cheerful, harmless. But underneath, the ground shifted in ways only I could feel. I tried to shake off the gnawing discomfort from the dining room earlier. Maybe I was being too sensitive, I thought. Maybe no one else had really noticed Di Mary's careless words. Maybe I could still salvage the day, the celebration, the version of my life I had spent so long building. Kevin wandered up to me, slipping a lemonade into my hand, his touch deliberate, grounding. His smile was soft but edged with concern. I smiled back, the expression foreign on my face. I wasn't going to ruin today. Not for him, not for us. Near the rose bushes, I heard Di Mary's voice again. Too bright, too casual. Well, it's just wonderful when young couples hurry up and make things right, isn't it? There it was, again. She stood among a small cluster of neighbors, her words tumbling out with innocent sweetness like she was praising me, like she was proud. The laughter that followed was light, but every giggle stabbed deeper than the last. It wasn't mocking, not really. Worse, it was pitying. My stomach twisted. I stayed frozen, rooted to the grass while my heart twisted itself into tighter knots. In their smiles, I saw the same pattern unfold, the shifting glances, the whispered assumptions, the judgments forming behind carefully polite faces. I thought back to high school dances and community bake sales, the way a single careless rumor could upend a life overnight. I remembered the time Carla spread a story about another girl at church just to get her kicked off the youth choir. Everyone believed Carla because she smiled wider, laughed harder, pretended better. History wasn't repeating, it was just continuing. I tightened my grip on the plastic cup, the lemonade inside sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Kevin sidled up next to me again, his brow furrowing. "You all right?" he asked, low enough that no one else could hear. I nodded too quickly. "Just tired." The lie tasted sour in my mouth. I wanted to tell him everything, the whispers, the doubts, the way my own family had weaponized love into something that hurt, but the words stuck. I couldn't ruin this day more than it already was. Instead, I smiled and squeezed his hand, pretending the invisible walls weren't closing in, that the breath in my lungs wasn't getting harder to hold. As I turned toward the patio, weaving between guests, I caught another whisper, this one from a neighbor leaning in close to her husband. "Poor Kevin. Hope he knows what he's getting into." The words dropped like lead into my chest. I clenched my jaw so tightly it ached, forcing my face into impassivity. My feet moved of their own accord, carrying me away from the crowd, away from the lemonade and the polite lies and the pitiful smiles. In my mind, something snapped, a delicate thread I had clung to for too long. Humiliation burned away, replaced by a sharper, colder emotion, anger. I didn't know when or how yet, but deep inside, something whispered back, "You need to fight, not today, but soon." The soft groan of the wooden floors beneath my feet felt like an old ghost welcoming me back. I sat down on the edge of my childhood bed, the quilt still carrying the faint scent of laundry detergent my mother swore by. Outside, the voices of my family floated through the cracked window, blurred by the late afternoon breeze. I pressed my palms into the mattress and closed my eyes. It was supposed to be a happy day. Instead, the walls seemed to close in around me, heavy with memories I had spent years trying to pack away. I breathed in, willing myself to stay present. But the past had already started clawing its way to the surface. The scholarship banquet had been scheduled for a Thursday night. I remembered that much. How I'd spent weeks polishing my essay, how proud I'd felt when I made it to the finals. Then, 2 days before the announcement, the whispers started. Accusations of plagiarism floated through the hallways at school like smoke, impossible to catch, impossible to fight. Carla's friends giggled behind their hands when I walked past, their eyes full of something worse than hatred, pity. It hadn't taken long for the rumors to find the administration's ears. I sat, trembling in the counselor's office while they read my essay aloud, searching for signs of dishonesty. I defended myself, heart pounding, voice cracking, but it didn't matter. When I came home that night, clutching a letter rescinding my scholarship eligibility, I found Carla curled on the couch with Mom, her head buried dramatically in Mom's lap, fake tears staining her cheeks. "She didn't mean for it to get out of hand," Mom said, stroking Carla's hair like she was the victim. "It's just... things can get messy. We need to think about the family's reputation." I stood there, gutted, waiting for someone, anyone, to stand up for me. No one did. "Let it go," Mom had whispered urgently when I opened my mouth to protest. "For the family, Marcia, please." That night I learned that loyalty meant silence, that protecting the family meant swallowing my pain, pretending the wound didn't exist. I thought that was the worst of it. But years later, at a 4th of July barbecue, I had overheard another conversation, one not meant for my ears. Mom, wineglass in hand, laughing quietly with a neighbor. "We had to talk to the school," she said, almost proudly. "Better Carla get a second chance than lose everything over a childish mistake. Marcia, she's tough. She can take it." I remembered the way my face burned as I stood behind the kitchen door, fists clenching so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I had been expendable, disposable. As long as the family looked intact, my dreams were collateral damage they were willing to accept. Sitting there on the bed now, all those old wounds throbbed with fresh life. Today's rumors weren't new. Today's betrayal wasn't new. It was just the latest verse in a song they had been singing my entire life. But something inside me was different now. I wasn't that scared, desperate girl anymore. I wouldn't swallow my pain to protect the people who had never once protected me. I looked up at the dusty trophies lining my old bookshelf, symbols of victories that had been hollowed out by lies. My reflection in the glass doors stared back at me, sharper somehow, more certain. They taught me silence was loyalty. I was about to teach them what truth sounded like. Morning sunlight filtered weakly through the thin curtains of my living room, casting a pale glow over the unpacked boxes and half-assembled decorations. Today was supposed to be about moving forward, about new beginnings. I clung to that thought like a lifeline as I brewed coffee, letting the warmth fill the empty house with something that almost resembled comfort. The doorbell rang just as I set the mugs on the table. Eleanor stood there, clipboard in hand, brisk and businesslike. She swept into the room, talking about final baby shower details before I could even invite her in. I told myself to breathe, to trust that today, at least, would be different. I sat across from her as she flipped through receipts and invoices. At first, everything seemed normal, until it didn't. There were missing orders. The custom cake I had requested was crossed off. The flower arrangements I picked were replaced with cheaper options. The guest favors I had personally selected were mysteriously unavailable. I frowned, tracing the thin red lines that crossed out so many things I had looked forward to. "Budget adjustments," Eleanor said airily when I asked. "Nothing you need to worry about." Her smile was brittle, too polished. A knot formed in my stomach. I asked for the final budget breakdown. She hesitated just a fraction too long before handing it over. The numbers didn't add up. I flipped through the pages, confusion giving way to a sickening clarity. New charges listed expensive centerpieces featuring Carla's photography portfolio, custom banners with slogans like "Celebrating New Beginnings." Not mine, not my celebration. I turned another page and found a note about a slideshow, Carla's journey of resilience and artistry, projected during the reception. It wasn't a baby shower anymore. It was Carla's redemption tour. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. I closed the folder slowly, setting it aside with trembling hands. I excused myself without meeting Eleanor's eyes, retreating to the sanctuary of my bedroom. Kevin followed minutes later, finding me sitting on the floor, back pressed against the side of the bed, staring blankly at the wall. He crouched beside me, his hand resting gently on my knee. "Talk to me," he said quietly. But what was there to say? That my family had rewritten my celebration into a shrine for my sister? That I had let it happen? The betrayal burrowed deeper than anger. It coiled into something colder, something that made my hands shake with the effort of keeping still. "I'm fine," I whispered, even though it was a lie so thin it barely held together. Kevin didn't push. He just stayed there, a steady presence against the unraveling storm inside me. Later, alone again, I pulled the receipts from my pocket and spread them out on the bed. The proof was there, black and white, undeniable. If they wanted a show, they would get one, just not the one they expected. The rain had begun sometime after lunch, tapping against the cafe windows in a steady, rhythmic beat that softened the sharp edges of my thoughts. Sitting across from my old friend, I wrapped my fingers around a warm mug of coffee, feeling the rare comfort of anonymity. Here, among the hum of conversation and the clatter of cups, I could almost pretend that the world hadn't cracked open beneath my feet just hours ago. She smiled nervously, stirring her drink in small circles. The years had changed us both, though I could still see glimpses of the girl who once shared whispered secrets with me between math classes. There was a sadness in her eyes now, a hesitation that made me brace myself without knowing why. "You know," she said slowly, tracing the rim of her cup, I used to envy you back in high school." I laughed softly, not unkindly. "If you only knew how often I envied you." She smiled back, but it faded quickly, replaced by a serious look that made my stomach twist. "I need to tell you something," she said, voice lowering. "Something about Carla." The air around us thickened, every other sound receding into a dull hum. I leaned in without meaning to, heart pounding. "Carla, she wasn't just jealous," she said. "She hated how teachers praised you, how guys noticed you. She used to make jokes behind your back, call you stuck up, say you thought you were better than everyone else." My breath caught. Part of me wanted to wave it off, say it didn't matter after all these years, but it did. It mattered more than I wanted to admit. "And," she continued, dropping her voice even further, "it wasn't just words." I frowned, confusion cutting through the slow-building hurt. She sabotaged you," she whispered. "With guys you dated. She'd tell them you were seeing other people, that you only wanted attention. She made sure things fell apart before they even had a chance." I sat back hard against the booth, the world tilting slightly around me. Every awkward breakup, every unexplained distance, it all snapped into focus with brutal clarity. Carla hadn't just resented me. She had actively waged war against my happiness. I stared at my coffee, the rain blurring the world outside into shapeless gray. My hands trembled slightly, the betrayal piling atop everything else until breathing felt like lifting weights. It wasn't just today's baby shower that had been stolen. It was dances I never got asked to, friendships that withered for reasons I couldn't name, a future quietly dismantled piece by piece while I smiled and played along. "I'm sorry," my friend whispered, her hand reaching across the table to cover mine. "You deserved better then. You still do." The kindness in her voice cracked something deep inside me. I swallowed hard, blinking against the sudden sting in my eyes. I stood slowly, pushing the chair back with more force than necessary. Rain lashed against the sidewalk outside, wild and unrelenting. I stepped into it without a second thought, the cold soaking through my jacket almost instantly. The sting of betrayal sharpened into something else, a silent vow forming deep in my chest. This war ends tomorrow. The dining room felt smaller than I remembered. The polished wood table that once hosted birthday parties and Christmas dinners now stretched like a battleground between us. I sat stiffly between Kevin and the bay window, my hands folded so tightly in my lap that the knuckles turned white. Carla beamed across the table, her laugh too loud, her jokes too rehearsed. Eleanor floated around the table, refilling glasses, adjusting silverware, masking the tension beneath a brittle mask of hospitality. Walter, as always, said little, simply carving his roast chicken with military precision. Something was coming. I could feel it, thick in the air like the threat of a summer storm. Eleanor cleared her throat and tapped a spoon against her wine glass, drawing all attention her way. She smiled, tight, deliberate, and lifted her glass. "We have a special announcement," she said brightly, the words slicing through the room sharper than any knife. I tensed. "After careful thought," she continued, "we've decided that Carla will be the godmother to Marcia's baby." The world seemed to tilt sideways. I stared at her, mouth slightly open, my mind scrambling to process what she had just said. We decided. Not me. Not Kevin. Them. Kevin shifted beside me, his hand brushing mine under the table in a silent question. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. A stunned silence followed, broken only by Carla's delighted gasp and a few scattered claps from the extended family seated at the far end of the table. No one asked me. No one even thought to. I swallowed hard, heart hammering against my ribs. I could have smiled and nodded, played along for the sake of peace like I always had, but the fire that had been quietly growing inside me for months now roared to life. "No," I said. The word dropped into the center of the table like a grenade. Eleanor blinked, her smile faltering. "Excuse me?" Kevin straightened in his seat, his jaw tight. I finally looked at him, found my strength mirrored in his steady gaze. "We already made that decision," I said, voice steady even as my insides trembled. "Kevin and I chose godparents months ago. This isn't something you get to dictate." The room plunged into a heavier silence. The tension tightened, coiling tighter around my throat. Eleanor's face hardened. "After everything we've done for you," she said, her voice rising with every word, "you dare stand here and be disrespectful, ungrateful?" She glanced around the room for support, but no one spoke. No one met my eyes. "You think you're better than us," she snapped. "But you're not. Family means sacrifice. Family means putting aside your selfishness for the greater good." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I simply let her words wash over me, carving fresh wounds over old scars. I looked around at the faces of the people I had grown up with, faces that now turned away, pretending not to hear, pretending not to see. I was alone, and for the first time I realized that maybe being alone wasn't the worst thing in the world. I gripped the edge of my chair so tightly that my fingers ached. Then, in a voice quieter but sharper than any shout, I whispered to myself, just loud enough to hear, "No one is choosing for me anymore, not now, not ever again." The afternoon sun hung low and lazy in the sky, casting a soft golden haze across the backyard. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, but beneath it all, I could feel the tremors. They moved underfoot, subtle at first, then heavier with every passing second. I sipped my punch carefully, smiling at old neighbors, nodding at distant relatives I barely recognized. Carla floated through the crowd like a queen, her smile wide, her movements theatrical. Every so often, she would glance my way, too satisfied, too rehearsed. I tightened my grip around the glass, willing myself to hold on just a little longer. This day wasn't about them. It was supposed to be about Kevin, about our future, about the tiny life growing inside me. Eleanor clinked a fork against her champagne glass, drawing everyone's attention to the small stage set up near the center of the yard. My stomach flipped. "I'd like to say a few words," she announced, the manila envelope in her hand shaking slightly. Or maybe it was just my vision blurring. She cleared her throat dramatically, then looked directly at Kevin and me. "Family means honesty," she said, "and sometimes honesty is painful, but necessary." The envelope crackled as she opened it, pulling out a folded paper that seemed to suck all the warmth out of the air. "This is a paternity test," Eleanor continued, voice falsely calm. "And I'm heartbroken to say, the results show that Kevin is not the father of Marcia's baby." The world tilted. For a moment there was no sound, only the ringing in my ears. I gripped the edge of the table beside me to stay upright, the blood draining from my face. Gasps rippled through the crowd, a sea of whispers and shifting feet. Then Carla stepped forward, hand to her chest like she was the grieving heroine in a bad soap opera. "I didn't want to say anything," she cried, voice trembling at just the right pitch, "but I couldn't let the lie continue. We have to protect Kevin." I stared at her, disbelief crashing against my ribs like a wave. My sister, my own blood. I opened my mouth to speak, but another voice beat me to it. A family friend, Mr. Jenkins, a man I barely knew, stepped closer to the stage. "I saw her," he said grimly, "with another man, downtown just a few weeks ago." Another gasp, another dagger. Kevin turned to look at me then, and the devastation on his face nearly undid me, but he didn't say anything. Silence wrapped around us like a noose. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the paper from Eleanor's hands and set it on fire, but all I could do was stand there frozen, as everything I had built crumbled at my feet. I thought humiliation would be the end of me. Instead, it became something else. Standing there, heart cracked wide open, something inside me shifted. This ends today. They wanted a war, they got one. The air inside the house was heavier than the backyard, as if the walls themselves knew what had just happened. I slipped through the sliding door, my heart pounding a relentless beat in my ears. Laughter and soft music still drifted from outside, but here the silence roared louder. I headed toward the gift table, needing something, anything to steady myself. My hands grazed the colorful packages and pastel bags, trying to ground my mind. That's when I noticed it. A thin folder, tucked clumsily behind one of the centerpieces, half hidden under a pile of tissue paper. A knot twisted in my gut. I pulled it free and flipped it open. The run sheet was neatly printed, bullet-pointed, color-coded. But not for me, not for my baby. It was an itinerary for Carla. Her milestones, her journey of overcoming adversity, her fresh start speech scheduled for 2 p.m. sharp. My hands shook as I turned the pages. It was all there. Not a single mention of me, not a word about Kevin, not a line acknowledging the child I carried. Just Carla. Always Carla. I pressed the folder against my chest, squeezing my eyes shut as a fresh wave of betrayal crashed over me. How long had they been planning this? How many times had I smiled at people who were only here to applaud her? Something slipped from one of the gift bags, fluttering to the floor. I bent down and picked it up. A gilded invitation card. Carla's New Start celebration. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. They had hijacked my baby shower for their redemption campaign. My throat tightened, but I swallowed it down. The tears could wait. I straightened, steeling myself as I stepped back into the foyer. Voices rose outside, murmuring confusion, discomfort. I moved toward them, heart hammering, just as Dean stepped up onto the makeshift stage near the patio. He looked different, steadier, somehow. No longer weighed down by loyalty to people who didn't deserve it. Without a word, he pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped it once, and raised it to the microphone. Carla's voice spilled into the air, tinny but unmistakable. Of course it's fake. You think she's smart enough to check the damn paperwork? God, they'll believe anything if you say it with enough tears. The crowd gasped, chairs scraped back, someone dropped a glass. Dean let the recording play a few seconds longer, just long enough for everyone to hear Carla's snide laugh before cutting the feed. The silence that followed was seismic. I stood there, breathing in the wreckage, feeling the ground settle beneath my feet for the first time in months. Across the yard, Carla's face had gone ashen. Her mouth opened and closed, no words forming. For once, the spotlight she so desperately craved left her stripped bare. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. Not my shame to carry anymore. The house smelled faintly of rain and something sour, like disappointment that had seeped into the walls. I kicked off my shoes and stood in the doorway for a long moment, staring at the living room that still bore the remnants of the celebration that wasn't. Gifts sat unopened by the fireplace, their shiny bows drooping, banners half hung from the ceiling, drooping under their own weight. Kevin moved silently around me, setting down bags, locking the door. We didn't speak. There was too much and nothing to say all at once. I sank onto the couch, resting my hands on my stomach, feeling the small, steady pulse of life beneath my palm, a quiet reminder of what mattered most. The doorbell rang. Kevin looked at me, a silent question, and I nodded. Dean stood outside, drenched from the rain, a crumpled paper bag clutched in one hand. He looked exhausted, defeated in a way I recognized too well. I needed to say something, he said as Kevin let him in. We sat again, the three of us in that awkward, heavy silence. Dean rubbed his hands together, searching for words. I knew, he finally said, voice rough. I knew what Carla and Eleanor were planning. Months ago. I said nothing, only watched him, feeling the old anger stirring, slow and dangerous. I wanted to tell you, he continued, his eyes pleading, but Carla, she threatened to ruin me, said she'd tell everyone things that weren't true. I was a coward. He set the paper bag on the coffee table. Inside were more printed messages, screenshots, emails, proof of everything. My hands stayed folded neatly in my lap. Thank you, I said simply, surprising even myself with how calm I sounded. Dean swallowed hard, nodding. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He knew better. After he left, the house seemed even quieter. Kevin sat beside me, his arm heavy around my shoulders. I leaned into him, letting the exhaustion wash over me. I'm done, I said softly. With all of them. Kevin kissed my temple, saying nothing because there was nothing left to debate. We would start over, without their approval, without their presence, and maybe, someday, without the ache they had left behind. As the sun set beyond the rain-slick streets of Madison, I stood by the window, feeling the first fragile threads of peace weaving through the wreckage. Healing isn't linear. Some wounds ache forever, but I get to choose what comes next. Looking back now, I realize that survival isn't just about enduring the storms life throws at you. It's about recognizing when to walk away from the places and the people that keep building new ones over your head. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't fighting for love. It's accepting that love, when it's real, never demands your silence, your shame, or your self-worth. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to protect your peace, even if it means disappointing those who taught you to shrink. Have you ever faced a moment where choosing yourself meant losing someone you loved? I would love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Your voice matters here. And if this video resonated with you, even just a little, please comment 1 inch or let me know where you're watching from. If it didn't, I'm open to hearing why. It's all part of the conversation we're building together. If you found this story meaningful, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one. Together, let's keep exploring the messy, beautiful, heartbreaking, and powerful truths that make us human.